All right, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you here. My name is Emily Lockhart, and I work at the New England Aquarium. Just a few housekeeping items before we get going. First, I know you can see me talking into a microphone, and yet you're not hearing anything come out of speakers. That is because this is for the recording of our session, and so if you can't hear us, it is definitely us and not you that is the problem. Tell us to speak up. The second thing is for questions. We're going to have a wonderful panelist introduction, and then we're going to open it up to the floor for questions. If you would ask a question and then expect to wait for a minute, because then I will speak into the microphone, repeating the question for the benefit of the recording, and then our panelists will answer the question. And for our panelists, if you will remember to remind me if I don't pass the mic, please ask for the microphone so that everyone can hear the intelligent, wonderful, inspiring things you will say. So this is our climate resilience panel. Welcome again. I am delighted to be here on behalf of the aquarium. I want to say that it's a pleasure to be supporting this effort generally here with the Plymouth Foundation and the Blue Future Conference. This is the aquarium's first time sponsoring this. We hope it won't be our last. And I'm going to start by just giving you a quick introduction about the aquarium and why we're here. And then we'll be moving into our panelists, and I will get a chance to introduce everybody as well. So if you give me just a second, I'm going to start out of order, because I'm like, wait a second here. And here we go. All right. So hello, good afternoon. I am Emily Lockhart, as I said before. I have the privilege of overseeing the strategy and growth of the aquarium's market-based strategies and solutions effort, basically the industry levers that we pull at the aquarium. I'm sure everyone at the aquarium everyone here is familiar with the aquarium, which is a nonprofit institution sitting in Boston's waterfront, just about 30 miles north of here. We, for over 54 years, have been responsible for protecting and caring for our ocean's animals, especially through our exhibit space that opened up in 1969. And in addition to the exhibit space that you might be familiar with, we also are unique because we have an independent research arm that is intrinsically related to the ocean health, and we think about how we are bringing both the science and education together to basically teach people about the ocean's resiliency, the animal health, and what our future is going to be looking like together, especially as we see that we are one blue planet. Let's see. Oh. Let's try it over here. There we go. Why the New England Aquarium? Excellent. All right. So why the New England Aquarium? As I mentioned, most of us think of the aquarium as a great place to visit. We are a global leader in ocean education and marine conservation, a major public education resource. We receive over 1 million visitors a year. And we're also an economic driver for the region, about $270 million annually in economic impact. We also have the waterfront that we are very pleased to be a part of. We've been there since our inception. One of the interesting things about being on the waterfront, which is actually one of the ocean's busiest urban waterfronts in the world, is that we're also seeing climate issues and thinking about coastal resilience on an almost daily basis. For the past few years, as we watch nor'easters come in, as we watch king tides come in, we are seeing increasing flooding. So we are experiencing some of the climate issues firsthand, in addition to thinking about, through, as I mentioned, our research and education, the importance of studying climate change and climate resilience. So there is one part of the aquarium that I have the pleasure of basically being the inaugural head of, and that's called the Balance Blue Lab. It is a new part of the aquarium. It's just started about 7 months ago. And what we do is we drive emerging and existing blue economy market towards ocean-friendly practices, sustainability goals, and climate adaptation strategies. We have decades of experience with corporate partnerships and deep technical and scientific expertise. And what we really do is we make science actionable. That is really what our guiding principle is. So we work on generating collaborative opportunities with ocean-related industries and other sectors, philanthropic foundations, startups, corporates, and link that science-based decision-making with responsible ocean use. And this is a little visual of sort of how we organize ourselves within the Balanced Blue Lab, which is that we work on the 3 I's. We work with innovators, industry, and investors. With innovators, I mean we work with startups to improve ocean health and resilience. You'll hear from Garrett in a minute. He's one of the startups, actually. The aquarium is a pleasure of working with. We work with industry. We advise government and industry actors on sustainability, responsible ocean use, science-based solutions. And we work with, recently, just starting, with investors, with ocean investors. And so, as an example, we run a program called Upswell, where we leverage our leadership in ocean conservation to create data-driven investor education about ocean tech, climate innovation, and hopefully strengthen the confidence of investors in investing in the blue economy. We see that the importance of really playing up the market lever of ocean health and ocean sustainability. And so we're excited to see these programs, really starting to take hold in Massachusetts and New England. And we'll see what happens in the months to come, actually. We're hoping more good things. So all that leads up to why we're actually here today, which is to talk about climate change, climate resilience. Global climate change is here, right? This is not a future problem. This is a now issue. Changes to the Earth's climate that are caused by, human uses have created widespread effects on the environment, especially on the ocean. We have glaciers and ice sheets that are shrinking, rivers, lakes, they're breaking up, drying up, plants and animal geographic ranges that are shifting. And it's probably fair to say we are heading into crisis, or if we're not there already. We have sea ice loss, accelerated sea level rise, longer, more intense heat waves. The sea level of the United States is predicted to rise between 1 and 6.5 feet by the year 2100. Hurricanes are going to become stronger and more intense, more heat waves, longer wildfire seasons. I find this picture very evocative of basically what we all feel and see more and more in the news and in our lives, right? It is getting hotter, wetter, drier, colder, warmer. Really what we're seeing is our planet changing significantly because of human action. But as I like to say, with all things, there's hope, right? And I think we are all here understanding that the ocean is key to climate resilience. We know the role that our global ocean has played already in mitigating some of the worst impacts of greenhouse gases. The ocean absorbs 30% of excess carbon. It also absorbs 90% of the warming that has occurred in recent decades because of increased greenhouse gases. It also, of course, has wonderful beneficial effects like producing half the oxygen we breathe. I have a little bumper sticker on my car that says, "Take a breath, thank the ocean." And at the aquarium, we think about this all the time. We are thinking about ocean and climate issues daily in our research and in our exhibition space. We see the impact of it. And we also, as I said, sitting on the waterfront in Boston's Central Wharf, we're feeling it every single year. So we also recognize it's time for not just plans of action, but real action. And we know that real action often comes in market solutions. So what we're going to get to explore next are some opportunities to talk about how we're going to be part of the solution. We are going to have an opportunity in the next couple of years within the Commonwealth, within our region, to really expand the blue economy. And climate tech is a huge part of that. So as we're thinking about blue carbon ecosystems, which I swear 2 or 3 years ago, I said blue carbon and nobody would even know what that is. Does anybody know what blue carbon is? 1, 2, okay, we're going to 3. Okay, that's better than 0, right? We're getting there. But really, we're thinking about, I think Garrett we'll talk a little bit about blue carbon. We're going to get a sense of what the ocean can do to actually change how carbon is being absorbed or not absorbed in our planet. We're going to get a chance to talk about ocean and climate innovation. So thinking about how do we get the data together, the modeling together, how important that is to be able to manage what we're dealing with. You can only manage what you can monitor, right? And we're going to be thinking about that as well. We're also going to be talking about how we're combating some very real tactile things in our ocean, ranging from ocean acidification to plastics in the ocean. And John's going to talk to us about how we're going to enhance coastal and global resilience through that. So I'm pleased to introduce our panelists today. First, I'll start with Garrett. So Garrett Bruneau is the founder and CEO of ViCarb, an ocean carbon tech startup based in Brooklyn. Garrett completed his PhD in organic geochemistry at the University of Colorado at Boulder, focused on ecological impacts of global climate change, and ran a research program at Cornell on carbon removal. At ViCarb, Garrett works to automate the measurement of water-based carbon to verify CO2 removal, storage, and management, which sounds dense. Honestly, I'm going to be honest. That's a lot. That's a mouthful right there. So I'm hoping you're going to unpack that a little for us. All right, good. And Garrett also serves on the Ecosystems Working Group for the New York State Climate Impacts Assessment. Welcome, Garrett. Catherine. So Catherine Houtanen is the Principal Program Manager of the Ocean and Climate Innovation Accelerator for Analog Devices. Catherine is a technology industry veteran with over 15 years of management experience in solving healthcare challenges using innovation, user-centered design, and emerging technologies such as sensors, IoT, AV, VR, telemedicine, and more. A lot of acronyms, Catherine. That's all right. Her deep engineering education, coupled with her innovation experience, enables her to lead strategic discussions on complex technology and workflow challenges. And finally, John Yantz is Senior Vice President of Strategic Development for Clean Seas Incorporated, a publicly traded startup focusing on diverting plastic from landfill and incineration and converting it, to new plastics and clean energy. That's pretty exciting, John. That's great. John's a local. He grew up on the waters around Cape Cod. Where on Cape Cod?
Orleans.
You grew up in Orleans. Fantastic. Do you like sharks, John? Good, I'm glad. I'm glad you like sharks. Okay. And his background is in developing sustainable, high-impact social enterprises and nonprofits. Welcome to everyone. I am now going to turn it over to John, or I think it's John. And so as we do this, just bear with me. I'm going to put up your presentation and give you the clicker. Here we go.
Excellent. Well, thank you. It looks like I'm being chopped off a little bit there on the side, but I think we'll be okay. Hi, everyone. I'm John. It's really exciting to be here. When I think of climate resilience, I usually think of the folks who offer to subsidize elevating your house or building seawalls in a seaside town or lots of other things. But I'm also mindful, and actually looked up this great quote from the Union of Concerned Scientists, which is kind of akin to the old, if you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. If you find yourself in a boat out in the middle of Cape Cod Bay, where I learned to sail, and you have a leak, well, yeah, you should bail, but you also need to find the hole and plug it. So that's where I come in, and I think I'd like to see, a very, very focused niche technology and theory here applied that I think could be applied in many different ways, but we have our own little narrow focus on this. So the first thing we need to do is talk about the global waste plastic crisis. And I don't think anyone who's paying attention knows we do indeed have a plastic waste crisis. I personally would go further and say I think we have a plastics crisis. we're just making way too much of this stuff, and we're certainly not dealing with it responsibly. There's people who might disagree. Plastic has brought some good things to our lives. Your car is safer and much more efficient than it would be otherwise. When your kid's at the hospital, use all the single-use plastic you want to. Doc, save my kid's life, right? I think most people would agree that there have been great advances. But again, there's some real challenges. And again, the data's out there. And the crisis has been around a long time. It only recently worked its way back up the supply chain to us. China dropped something they called the national sword, where they stopped accepting a lot of waste from other countries, mainly plastic. It did affect some other waste streams as well. And that there's been repercussions. There are international conventions now addressing where you can ship waste plastic. So that has really kind of backed up onto our shores and has had some direct impacts here. So, you know, there's well-documented environmental and health and economic impacts. I think it's one thing important to remember is that all mismanaged plastic is ocean-bound, whether you're in Kansas City or in Plymouth. And the impacts are actually greater here in blue economy destinations like New England. And there's some little, just beginning to understand, you know, these little understood impacts of the climate impact of plastic waste. So plastic itself has a climate impact, certainly, but also mismanaged plastic waste has an impact. It does give off greenhouse gas. It also makes its way into incinerators or landfills where there's bad impacts. And in fact, just up the street here in Covanta, there's a huge incinerator called CMAS that we're probably all familiar with, and a lot of your household waste will go there. So if you imagine, you know, at least my plastic made it into the incinerator, you know, that's better than the environment, and it is marginally. But here's the secret: they don't want it either. It messes up something called their high heating values, right? So an incinerator works much less efficiently when it has a lot of plastic. And there's good data. They've been tracking more and more plastic making it its way into the waste stream. So with our plastic waste problem, there are solutions. Everyone's heard of the waste management hierarchy: reduce, reuse, recycle. Learn it, live it. It's really, really important. And then there's also emerging models of circularity. If anyone's familiar with the extended producer responsibility, EPR, it's a fairly simple concept that's really hard to apply. You build something, you own it. You should be responsible for the end of its life. A great example of EPR has been around for a long time, the bottle bill, which, as we know, is very limited in scope and has challenges in its application. So let's take a slightly closer look at some of these solutions. So reduction and reuse it's hard, right? The bans that are out there, everyone's heard about, you know, various towns are banning water bottles. The state has just banned the state from purchasing water bottles, but it's not going to affect you going down to the 7-Eleven here or the lobby or whatever else. I don't see any water bottles out here, so that's kind of nice. I do see some plastic soda bottles and maybe a plastic cup. And look, it's hard, right? It's everywhere, and you know, we all struggle with that. So the bans are slow to roll out. They're really hard to enact, and they're caught in jurisdictional and political fights, which is not surprising at this time in history. In the state of Michigan, they're trying to ban some certain cities, so Detroit namely, is trying to ban single-use plastics. Well, the state legislature got out ahead of that and said, well, no, towns can't ban plastic. It's a state decision. And that's just one small example. And then you end up with a confusing patchwork, right? You know, so I'm not allowed to buy water bottles right now in Falmouth, but I guess I can load up at BJ's at the bridge and bring it down with me, right? I mean, it's just crazy. And then there's also real challenges, even when people are really trying to act with intention. Compostable serviceware, I call it, quote, compostable, because there's very real challenges with saying, okay, we're going to substitute a compostable to-go container for that styrofoam container. Well, composting is really, really hard systematically, much alone in your backyard, and not everyone has the option to do that. And then there's really stubborn challenges of implementation I talked about, and then unintended consequences. So two things. Well, I had someone I went to visit, and they proudly brought out a carton of water, saying, "John, we heard you. We're getting rid of the plastic water bottles." Well, that's actually worse. It's actually less recyclable than a plastic water bottle. So again, these things are hard. And then a nonprofit that I volunteer on the board with installed a water filling station down the Cape. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but in a particular town. And we went back to check on a year later. Is the signage still there? Does it look clean? You know, can we share some impact stories? We're collecting data on how many water bottles, yada, yada, yada. Well, some very thoughtful person decided to put a plastic cup dispenser next to this water bottle filling station. Probably the best of intentions, not really what we all had in mind. So there's also solutions of recycling and circularity. And we talked about the impact. Towns are paying twice as much now to get rid of their municipal solid waste, which includes recycling. So, you know, if you have a ton of plastic sitting in your garage right now, if it has the number 1 or 2 on the bottom, that's worth money, actually. You can bring that down to North Carolina, sell it for $100. If it's 4 or 3 through 7 or 4 through 7, you're going to pay $120 a ton to get that taken away. And who's paying for that? Well, we are, of course. And then it goes beyond municipal solid waste. I want to make sure I'm respecting everyone's time, because I could go on and on and on, but there's an awful lot of plastic out there, and you can see some things here, and we'll make sure that you can have access to my deck later on, that are just not getting recycled. So it really starts to boggle the mind. There's so much of this stuff out there. Fortunately, we live in a region of the country that is has a wealth of resources. We're almost like a sustainability laboratory. Again, I mentioned I volunteer on the board of a nonprofit that just got a grant from NOAA to displace single-use plastic from food service establishments. And again, the rollout of that is really, really hard, but it's pretty exciting as well. So why am I coming to you here? Why am I talking to you about this? What's the solution here? One of a small part of the solution, and we don't put ourselves at reduce, reuse, or recycle. I don't call what I'm doing recycling, but there's still tons of plastic out there that's not getting dealt with in those first 3 responsible ways. So we're a publicly traded company. We're started up with a mission to take all those 4 through 7 plastics that aren't worth anything right now and converting them. We're publicly traded. We're based in California. We have R&D in India. We have an operational facility in Morocco. And we work with ESG investors, people who want to check that box. The technology at the moment is pyrolysis. We're not a technology company. We don't think any technology is perfect yet. On the other hand, we think that this challenge is so urgent, we're deploying this technology now. We will be opening our first facility in West Virginia next year. What do? We put in mixed plastics that aren't recyclable. We're outputting it to syngas, liquid, and carbon char. The gas we can use to cycle back, and that powers our system, so we're not pulling a lot of power from the grid. We are consuming plastic to power our operation. There's no getting around it, but it's still better than the alternative. We're getting ultra-low sulfur liquid precursors for new plastics, or when we can, or we're putting it back into to the petrochemical cycle of diesel or fuel. And then we're getting char, which sequesters carbon. And because of this, we're eligible for plastic and carbon credits, other environmental credits. We do aspire to make hydrogen, which we are very excited about as the fuel of the future. However, it's not quite here yet, but we can use the same technology to do that. We're really excited to be looking at developing a facility here in Massachusetts, and it's really hard to build anything in Massachusetts, but we're determined to do it, and we have some great partners. There's actually some sample feedstock there that, I don't know if Hui's in here at the moment, but there you are. They have some end-of-life aquaculture gear that no one knows what to do with. At the moment, it's going to the incinerator. Again, not a great outcome. We can't promise that we can do it, but we're working on it. There's also a 60,000-seat stadium that I probably shouldn't tell you the name of, but it's nearby, that they're going to be replacing all their seats fairly soon, and we're experimenting, seeing if we can actually take those, again, diverting those from landfill and incineration. We're going to be diverting 100,000 tons a year of plastic from landfill incineration. We're investing money, good construction jobs, good operations jobs, clean energy, sequestering carbon, and how much time do I have left? 2 minutes, I can do this. So we do have some challenges. What I do is not without controversy. There's some really fine environmental organizations that I respect that don't like what I'm doing. And they're going to say, John, all you're doing is letting them off the hook to make more plastics. I respectfully disagree. McKinsey projects we're going to hit peak plastic at 2050, maybe 2060. Even if all those EPRs and other reduction initiatives come through, again, think about it's not just the plastic in your recycling bin. If you're good about putting plastic in your recycling bin, and not everyone is, it's not just that, it's the cars, it's clothing, it's everywhere. We're not going to run out of plastic. My investors, that's not one of the questions they ask me. Are you going to run out of plastic? What happens if the environmentalists win? I'm like, great. You know what? 20 years from now, I've paid off my factory and made a lot of money for my investors. We're not going to be doing that. But there is NGO opposition, so we have a lot of education to do. We have some regulatory issues here in Massachusetts especially. We aim for plastic to plastic. We don't call it recycling. Some people call what we do advanced recycling. I refuse to because it's not recycling. It comes after recycling. Hierarchy is important, order of operations. And then getting people to change anything, again, really, really hard, but that's why I'm here. Am I good? Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone.
That was fantastic. Thank you, John. And I want to say that I think everybody in the audience, if they happen to have a single-use plastic bottle in their possession today, is at least going to make sure that you're using it twice, right? So that is right. It's a fascinating technology. Exactly. Looking forward to hearing more about this during the discussion. I'd now like to turn it over to Catherine at ADI, who's, of course, because she works in a technology world, is much more adept at changing the PowerPoint presentations than I ever will be. And she's got it going. No pressure. All right. Catherine, I'm going to pass you the mic.
This is driving me nuts. I'm pushing the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, go closer. See, so.
There we go.
It's not like my slides are that exciting, I'll be honest. No, I just
think we got
wanted
it.
It's like, I don't have all the fancy photos that everybody else has, so here it is. Okay. Hello, everyone. First off, how many of you, the company name is actually Analog Devices, and we go by the nickname ADI. How many of you have heard of Analog Devices? Just to show of hands. Oh, great. So just one or two slides on the company. So first off, we are, come on. I'm failing my engineering right here so hard. Okay. So we're based in Wilmington, Massachusetts. We're a 58-year-old company, and we're a global semiconductor manufacturer that makes parts that are touching pretty much everything in your life right now. We have 125,000 employees around the world, and we have 125,000 customers. So we sell to very different types of industries that solve very difficult problems. So we're probably in an electric car that you may have seen or driven. We might be in your phone, your set-top TV. We're in satellites. We're now beneath the ocean, which I'll talk about a little bit more. So luckily, Brett had given a great introduction of the edge computing in his Mayflower conversation, and that's really where ADI really strengthens. So we take the analog world and turn it into digital so that you can make do actions on it. So you want to take that data from the ocean, from anywhere, and turn it into actionable insights. So we sense the physical world. We take that data and we convert it into digital signals, where we then do some edge processing on it, which can then be transmitted to a satellite, to any other location, back-end service to actually make decisions. So we do all the way from the physical world, we do the communications, and we do the power management. So we own a lot of this space right here that's highly relevant to the ocean and the climate space. So what I personally do for Analog Devices is that I own the Ocean and Climate Innovation Accelerator. So this is something that was launched in 2021. It came together where our CEO, Vince Roche, met Peter Domenical, the president of Woods Hole Oceanographic. And there was a great likeness of minds and realizing that our technology is a game changer for getting that data at scale out of the ocean and used to make policies, and get the information we need to understand what is actually going on in the ocean. So since that time, we've got a couple of additional members to our accelerator. We brought on National Instruments, now known as NI, and First Horizon Bank, which is a financial contributor. And so this is not a traditional accelerator like one normally hears about. It's like we don't bring in startups and invest in them and accelerate them through it. This is really about accelerating the insights and the research being done at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. So we're really focused on generating the knowledge and solutions at the intersection of ocean and climate science and engineering. So what our consortium members do is that what we're bringing in is the funding to help support the scientists as they do their work. But what's more exciting is that we're bringing our actual technical expertise. So we're talking to the scientists as they're having struggles with their engineering. How might I solve this solution? So we're able to give them like very specific advice. Here's how you design the circuit. Here's a part that would make sense. This is how you could tackle this problem. And we're also making our tech available. So they're getting very early stage things that are coming off of our manufacturing. We're sitting there and at the bench with them, testing out stuff to see if it actually will work to help solve their problems. So that is really kind of moving, accelerating the work that they're doing. One of the scientists there that we're supporting, he said, by working with us, he saved at least 6 months of development time. And they're actually doing their prototypes on industry, commercial grade components, as opposed to starting off with those more hobby things that are, great to build a prototype, but then you can't scale it into a commercial project. So we're giving them the support to, let's design this with a goal of going to commercialization from the very beginning. So we are funding 11 different projects at WHOI. I know it's a bit of an eye chart. But anyway, so in 2021, we started off in carbon capture. And all of this is available. Oh, is it not? So all of this is going on, is on the website. And in 2021, we started off by funding carbon capture. And in that involved some devices they had to sense the carbon in the ocean, as well as what is seagrass doing, as well as you heard earlier about buoyancy engines. We have somebody developing a zero power buoyancy engine. Then in 2022, we moved to coastal communities, so back to the climate resilience. And we're really working to understand how can we get that data at density and scale along the coastlines. So for example, in the state of Massachusetts, there are 5 NOAA sensors that are giving us tide level data. And there's 5, they cost $50,000 a piece. So you're not going to put them all over the place, just the sheer cost of these things. So one of the research teams that we're supporting is developing really low cost tide sensors so they can be distributed much more densely along the coastline so that we can get that information to make those decisions about infrastructure and planning. I mean, early stages, but that's kind of one of the things we're supporting. We're also supporting things like high frequency radar about how can we understand what's happening in the sea level swells, and also things like a really low-cost pH sensor using our technology. Again, how might we partner with the people that are already in that 1 kilometer off the coast and get that data in a very dense way? Can we work with the fishermen, with swimmers, whomever that might be able to collect that data so that we can make the decisions needed to make sure that we're building up resistant communities? So very quick overview about what we're doing, but it's really about taking our technology as an enabler to really transform the science, how it's done, speed it up, get that data cheaper, make those devices last longer in the ocean because of low power, and get the communication so we can get it in a timely manner back to the land to make decisions. So just a quote I always like to end with is from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince. Is as for the future, the task is not to foresee it, but to enable it. So thank you.
Great. Hey everyone, my name is Garrett Boudinot. I'm the founder of, as Emily said, about a 1-year-old startup. We're based in Brooklyn, and we're really focused on empowering coastal communities with climate solutions. I'm showing a picture of us doing that right here, or over in the New York City harbor. I love this picture because we were able to, this was about 6 years in as a company, so pretty early on already deploying our technology, and I'm going to tell you all about that today. So. As Emily said, my background's really as a climate scientist. I spent most of my career measuring the impacts of climate change around the world, and particularly in coastal ecosystems. So I heard the Lieutenant Governor say that it's STEM week here, and so we are going to do a deep dive into some science. I do think of coastal communities as really the front lines of climate change, not only for the reasons that we've talked about today, things like sea level rise, but also on a chemical level, the actual impacts of carbon dioxide altering the chemistry, the biology of coastal waters, and that having a pronounced impact on a number of sectors. So we all know carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are causing climate change, but also land use change, things like runoff and pollution are really a 1-2 punch to coastal water chemistry, changing really the fundamental molecule for all life, carbon dioxide. Again, going into the science here, forgive me, but it's worth it. Carbon dioxide in water is a lot more complex than in air because it changes form into multiple, let's see if here we go, multiple different molecules, bicarbonate, carbonate. And under a normal ocean, CO2 is actually a pretty minor component. But due to climate change, both from absorption of CO2, but also changes in biology and pollution, now CO2 is becoming a much higher component of the water carbon cycle. And that has two real main impacts that we're concerned about. The first is now, while much of the open ocean is absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere, most coastal oceans are actually now a source of CO2 to the atmosphere. So this map here I'm showing, any blue or red dot is waters that are actually emitting CO2 to the atmosphere. And we don't think about this much, but this is actually 10 billion tons of CO2 coming from waters to the atmosphere. That's on par with about a quarter of human emissions. And that high CO2 not only contributes to more climate change, it also causes acidification. This is CO2 causing or forming carbonic acid, and that's already having measured impacts on aquaculture, on other blue sectors around the country and around the world. Now, Emily said it really well earlier, we can't manage what we can't measure. And the problem is because carbon in water is so difficult or so complex, it's actually very difficult to measure, let alone manage. And so that is the challenge that we set to solve over at Vicarb, where we've developed a precision technology to both measure and manage carbon in water. And right now, a lot of our systems look like this. These are modular systems that sit on a dock. They pump up water. They can measure in real time all of those different carbon molecules. And when we detect excess CO2, we can remove it and convert it to bicarbonate, carbonate, essentially restoring that water quality. And I'll talk more about that. But one of the big advantages of our approach is, again, that real-time monitoring. So we really have a first-of-a-kind sensor where we can not only detect pH and CO2, which is really important, but that whole carbon cycle in the water, which is really critical for improved management. And we get all that data in real time, so we can detect and assimilate this data from a number of locations remotely. So the way that we're able to remove this CO2 in the waters that we detect and restore that water quality is essentially a pH buffered reaction. So we're just reversing acidification. And we do that with a hardware solution that essentially adds dissolved minerals that have calcium or magnesium. These are already being used in a lot of aquaculture and other wastewater management facilities to drive this pH buffering reaction. Using our sensor technology, we're now able to deploy that in natural waters safely and effectively. And so what that means is we kind of have two value propositions, two products. One is the water quality improvement. So we work with shellfish farms over in Long Island, for example, or the Department of Environmental Protection in New York City, where we're able to demonstrably reduce acidification in the water, improving it for biology, improving it for ecosystem health. But we're also able to reduce the emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and number of folks are really interested in using that as kind of a carbon offsetting model. In New York State, which is what I'm more familiar with than Massachusetts, the state has a very ambitious climate act where they've committed to reducing or becoming net neutral by 2050. The state recognizes that about 15% of emissions cannot be reduced on that time frame. So the state is already looking to essentially buy offsets. And we're already seeing this from the Department of Energy at a federal level as well. And of course, this is happening from corporates. And so these two together kind of get at our full revenue stack, which is helping us grow already. So I mentioned we've got a number of pilots deployed. Our first was started a few months in as a partnership with the East Hampton Town Shellfish Hatchery. So this is a municipal shellfish hatchery that was actually started back in the 80s in response to a number of environmental changes that were decimating the local shellfishing community and economy. And so this is a municipal group that has resources to stimulate development in anything that can help a more sustainable blue economy. So we've been deploying there with the nursery and with the shellfish floating cages. When we started, we were doing about grams per year carbon dioxide removal. It's not really going to move the lever on our global climate crisis, but it allowed us to demonstrate and prove out our core technology and allow us to scale up to this picture I keep showing of our tech out in the New York City harbor. So that's the Brooklyn Bridge, that's Brooklyn where we're based, and Wall Street's right over there, where now we're doing kilograms scale carbon dioxide removal. The IPCC says we need to remove about 10 billion tons of carbon dioxide. So we're still not there, but this is pretty good progress in just a few months that we're really proud of. I like to show some data from what we're seeing in these pilots. And so here I'm showing all those different carbon molecules plotted on 3 different plots on top. And then pH, kind of a core water quality indicator that a lot of our shellfish partners like to use as an indicator of acidification. What we see here is just natural variability in the carbon cycle over the course of about a day. We see CO2 actually changes about 20% over just a few hours. CO2 changes naturally. Photosynthesis, biology is changing that carbon cycle. That's fine. But all of this is in excess of what it should be. And so in response to that excess CO2, we're running a number of cycles where we're reducing that down to what it should be, which is about 20 milligrams in our system here. And using our sensor, we're able to show concomitantly, mole per mole, that we're transforming that carbon dioxide into bicarbonate and carbonate. These are stable carbon molecules. So they hang around in the ocean water for about 100,000 years. So we're confident that that CO2 is locked away, no longer a greenhouse gas. But if you think back to those plots I showed earlier, it's restoring that water quality by increasing those beneficial carbon molecules. And we're able to show that it improves the water quality, increasing the pH to what DEP and shellfish farmers want. Our first purchase was actually from a software company out in California who's interested in buying carbon removals as part of their climate initiative. So now we are selling our first 60 tons of carbon dioxide that we remove. And we're building much larger systems that can not just do kilogram per year, but several tons per year in a still modular fashion so we can get this out to customers coupled to water quality improvement. And I do want to highlight, Emily said earlier, we were just brought into the Sea Ahead program, which is based in Boston, in partnership with the New England Aquarium, which is really helping us develop out this tech, get more partners, and explore new opportunities. We're a pretty technical team we're actually now 7 folks. And again, we're based in Brooklyn, New York. We're always looking for folks who have expertise in any of these areas to join with us as advisors, as partners, just have good conversations so we can keep learning more about this space and where we could be additive. And I do like to just add, from shellfish farms to industry to water quality management, we work with a number of different partners, a lot of different value propositions here that we believe is really important for improving coastal climate resiliency. So Blue Swell, Sea Ahead, New England Aquarium is one of our new partners, including a number of others globally. In New York State, we're always looking for more because we really think that'll help us have a bigger impact. So thank you all.
Garrett, thank you. John, thank you. Catherine, I'm going to just turn that off. Thank you very much. We are going to open this up for questions from the audience. I'm going to kick it off with one question, which is, I think, for each of you to maybe think about an answer, which is, we've been listening to some incredible opportunities here, I think, in thinking about the resilience, climate change, how we're going to be addressing the crisis from various different sort of potential solutions. If you wouldn't mind candidly sort of speaking your heart about this, what do you see as the biggest obstacle to getting your work out there? A more positive way might be sort of what is one thing you want to see change to help unlock more opportunity. But I would be curious to hear what you're seeing, because you're right there on the front lines. You're right there. You're working with scientists, or you are scientists also working with scientists. You're working with government. You're working with policymakers. You're working with the market. I think most importantly, I'd love to get your thoughts on where you're seeing the biggest challenge or most potential to unlock some of these solutions. So I know it's not a softball, but who wants to go first? Yeah, Garrett. Garrett, you've been Here, I'll move to you've been voluntold. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, we think about this a lot. We're certainly excited about all the federal dollars that are going into research and development and commercialization in this space. So NOAA has put a lot of money into both marine carbon dioxide removal, but also acidification mitigation and protection. And so that's something that we work with their program managers a good bit. And then on the market side, we're seeing, as I said, a lot of interest in this carbon removal offset space. John and I were talking earlier. I mean, that's like the Wild West. Who knows what that's really going to look like in 5-10 years, and certainly not without its controversy. And so we certainly want to see more more stable market development into demonstrable, quantifiable climate solutions. But I mentioned the federal support earlier because while it has gotten a lot of attention because it is new, we still need a lot more. And I think the urgency of solving climate change and the time scales at which we need to solve this crisis really mean we need an unprecedented amount of funding coming into some solutions that might not be market ready or might not yet have a market. And we want to make sure, when I think about the impacts of acidification on aquaculture, a lot of folks know it's a threat, but aren't already experiencing it. So as a startup, that means that market is nascent. We still should be developing that solution. And so that's where I think across climate resiliency, making increasing federal dollars so that we're ready for those challenges as they come is going to be really important.
Yes to federal funding, as you just said. One thing which I find interesting is because Analog Devices is not an expert on the ocean or climate, right? And a lot of corporations or corporate companies have been doing things for years on the terrestrial, and they've always ignored the ocean because was it really a market? Is there a business there? We don't know. And with all these words about the blue economy, people are like, yeah, but what does that mean for us? Like, how can we get involved? It is insanely complicated out there. I mean, there's a reason why there's so many institutes around it, but there's a very silo between terrestrial activities and ocean activities. And so part of what I'm really learning as I'm building up this OCIA thing is that the learnings between the scientists of them trying to pull the information out of them in a way that we can understand it, because every industry speaks its own language, right? So how do we get that cross communication from but what are the big problems and what do you need in order to do this at scale? And then on their side is how can we explain to them okay, this is what our technology does and how it can help you, and that there are different ways to do this that not everything has to be so expensive and so complicated. We can take technology we've developed for like electric vehicle and how might it actually translate into the ocean. But it's really going to take those partnerships that span across and take the best of both worlds, the best of the corporates that have, I know how to make a great scalable product, low cost, that we can manufacture and deploy around the world. We need to partner with those people that know this is what we really need to know. This is why it's so hard to operate in the ocean. These are the environments you're dealing with, the corrosion, the communications. It is a whole thing that most companies I don't think have dealt with extensively. So it's really getting that, the possibility I think of bringing those groups together is what's going to be really transformative and disruptive for the blue economy. And it is going to take multiple parties working together in order to get those solutions out there at scale in an affordable way. Even if we have a ton of, of funding, it's still gonna, we still need to be very aware to make this affordable and deployable and usable for many different more people.
So I just want to underscore what Garrett said about, I think, support and openness to innovation. And it's not just from the funding side, because that can be complicated, but also a bit from the regulatory side and from essentially getting NGOs to the table as well to also agree that we shouldn't let good enough or much better than current practice be the enemy of perfect. Or I probably said that backwards. Thank you. We shouldn't let perfect be the enemy of much better than current practice, because that, I do see that playing out, and it's challenging. Again, I grew up here. Massachusetts is a really hard place to do business, and I'm actually a guy who says good because that makes it also a wonderful place to live, right? In other words, I've done business in enough places that there are some places that have not had the sense of stewardship that we do as a government, as a community, as a business community. So I wouldn't advocate for looser regulation in that way, but what I would advocate is for greater openness to innovation in the face of a real crisis, that we need solutions we can deploy today.
Keep standing. I think it's probably easier this way. So any questions from the audience? Okay. Actually, I'm going to bring the microphone to you. I think that'll be better to hear in your words than in mine.
Hi, my name is Dottie Fulgenetti, and I live in the town of Easton, and we're experiencing a lot of problems with PFAS. And PFAS, when I'm hearing what you're saying, that's coming to my mind because that's included in the manufacture of plastics. So we're involved in a class action lawsuit against the makers, DuPont and other big chemical manufacturers. And I'm wondering, if we're trying to reduce one-time plastics, is there an opportunity there to, consolidate some of that support so that these manufacturers stop using those chemicals, which would maybe change the way they look at plastics?
All right, we've got a great question about PFAS and plastics. So I'm looking at John to start us. PFAS, solve it, please.
Oh, yeah. Sure. And next week, after we fix that problem, so look, that's a very real problem, and I think it ties into what I started out with. I think we don't just have a plastic waste problem, we have a plastic problem. And look, my background is I'm a business guy, I'm a social entrepreneur, so I'm not an engineer and I'm not a technologist, so grain of salt here. But I do know that there's a lot of, so the plastics and petrochemical companies know they have a problem with PFAS, and so do all the waste handlers, and so they are working on it. I would say they're not eager to keep making the problem worse. I believe that. The real problem is that there's a real challenge in implementing and getting rid of the ingredients that go into what they're doing. The lead time is years, decades even. So in the face of that, we need to make sure that we're not just built, we certainly should be addressing the reduce side of it, or the refuse to let these things be sold. Part of that is tied into extended producer responsibility, which has to say, if you're going to make it, you're going to own it all the way through its life cycle. There's an important concept in what I do called, life cycle assessment. You look at the entire life cycle of a molecule of petroleum coming off the North Slope of Alaska until it goes to wherever it ends up, right? So we need to make sure that we're advocating for those policies. I do think the legal system is actually can be an effective mechanism there. But then, where I come in and my really narrow lever in this whole thing is also making sure that the waste itself is being handled responsibly. And again, we're very mindful of PFAS. Our process does not release PFAS and can ideally, if it's present in our feedstocks, which it generally isn't, can be eliminated as well.
Other than I live in Barnstable and I always read our water quality reports and I always look at that PFAS number and like, oh man, it's a problem.
That's a great question. Oh, okay.
I'm Jay Lustig from MITRE. Couple things. First, it's nice to see face-to-face as opposed to Zoom for people I haven't met before. I'll get to my MITRE question in a moment, but I also serve on the board of directors of a drinking water company. And part of the PFAS problem, from our point of view, is that the government hasn't decided what are acceptable levels in the water supplies. Right? And as hard as we try to deal with that, you're dealing with the unknown. And if we want to take a sample of the drinking water supply, here's the sample today, send it to a lab, you wait 10 days to 2 weeks to get the answer back. Well, 2 weeks from now, that count is totally different than when you took that measurement originally. So companies like MITRE and others are working on spot detection and sensors that will give you immediate answers to things like that. But on the MITRE side of this question is that recently at the aquarium, Director Spinrad was talking about secondary benefits of some of the work that innovative companies are doing. So you have a product, you're manufacturing that, but secondarily you're producing data. And data needs to be shared even if it's monetized somehow. So are your plans to somehow monetize the data that you're doing, sharing the data? What happens to it other than pure ownership and putting it behind bars somewhere?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think that I don't know who wants to take it first, but really this is also just to go on what you were talking about. No Administrator Spinrad was at the New England Aquarium, I think it was a month ago or so, talking about what he is coined the new blue economy, which is really thinking about data and how all this data that's being generated, we heard about this earlier in our plenary session, but all this data that's being generated has the potential to be commodified and commoditized. What are we doing? I suppose, Administrator Spinrad's thinking about it from the government point of view, right? All this wonderful data that is federally supported, what do we do with it? And, from the industry side, also generating lots and lots of data. And, how are you thinking about utilizing that and sharing it or not sharing it, sort of what the thoughts are on that. So who would like to go first? All right, John. Here we go.
So I'm going to, first of all, real quickly address the PFAS thing again, because, so you brought up something that's really, really important, is that if you go out and collect a bucket of water right now out of the sky, there's PFAS in that water. And the EPA is currently has issued draft regulations that would say, for example, for certain technologies, might tangentially apply to mine or might not, that there'd be a zero tolerance for PFAS. And how's that even possible? I mean, it's everywhere. It's on you right now. I mean, sorry, but it just is. Right? So that's a challenge. Like, we do have to have real conversations about what is a minimal acceptable level. I mean, I think none, but that's also not realistic. The second thing is on data. A very interesting thing for us, we talked a little bit about carbon credits. There's also other emerging environmental credits to help fund innovation. There's plastic credits, which is an emerging market. There's something called biodiversity credits, and there's others that I'm literally learning about still. But a key component to these is data, is clear, transparent. Okay, so you're taking this much carbon and or plastic or whatever you're measuring out of circulation, and you're dealing with it responsibly. And it's going to be offset because there are, it's not 100% pure. Part of what you're doing does have a carbon, it's a net benefit, but it's not 100% benefit. So we have pledged, first of all, we have to collect all and curate all that information for business purposes. But we have also pledged that that'll be up on the blockchain, and it's part of our value prop. And frankly, it excites our investors to see that out there. Like, oh, we can prove we're doing good.
Yeah, I mean, we started off as a measurement company because we saw a huge gap in the data on changes in carbon cycle in the oceans. And in this world of both monitoring climate impacts, but also trying to manage carbon in the ocean for climate change mitigation, there's an inordinate amount of reliance on models. Models are really useful in the climate. There's a famous saying that modelers love to throw around that all models are wrong, some are useful. And I think particularly in the ocean space, we can, and like most of my PhD committee was ocean biogeochemical modelers. But the reason they were on my committee is I was generating real data, and that's a huge gap. And so I think particularly thinking about ocean carbon cycling, we need technologies that can actually, at low cost and at scale, generate that data. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do. And then in terms of how we think about that as a company and sharing that data, there's a reason I like to show some data in any talk that I give. I think that's our big value proposition is there's lots of folks or lots of companies in this carbon offset space who say we are removing CO2. And you say, how do you know? And they say, we developed a model that shows that what we're doing removes CO2. You say, who developed that model? They say, we did. And you say, can you show us that model? And they say, of course not, that's proprietary. And so for us, it is, we feel like we're a bit swimming upstream in that with investors we talk to, a lot of them say, no, that we've been told that data needs to be proprietary. You should not share that. And we say, no, this is part of our business, is that we need to share that data. And then working with other organizations who have expertise in data assimilation and transmission, and then with folks who are generating the models from that. So the partnerships side is big there, because we have found that like putting our data on a GitHub gets very little interest from people who even would be interested in it. And so that's where like building those partnerships in and being at places like here where we can share with folks who would be interested that we have it.
Interesting. I had a conversation about Blue Nerve 2 weeks ago with Nick Rocker. So, what I said, I came into this about a year and a half ago now, and I worked at Intel for years. I have a semiconductor for years, and I was a little bit flummoxed by the lack of standards, which is a really boring topic for most people, right? So IEEE dictates what standards are, USB 3.0, this is what it is, this is what it means. Everybody marches to the same drum. And looking at the ocean space, and they have all these different sensors, all this data, there's no way to correlate between everything. Like just because sensor X over here said something and sensor Y said something, you can't actually say, how do I make sense out of that? You don't know exactly, the metadata isn't there. It's like, well, where exactly was this taken? When was it taken? How accurate is this? I mean, there's a huge gap in the ocean space, particularly about this lack of standards. So we started to engage with the IEEE Standards Association. They have a whole new initiative going on about building out standards and what does that mean. And it's kind of that enabling thing, again, that unless we have the ability to correlate between all these swaths of data, you can make it as public as you want, but how do you make sense out of it? How can you turn it into something that's actionable, visualizable, people that understand it? What does it mean? So again, not the sparkly answer, but I think it's a fundamental need on the side to make sure that we have really hardcore, rock solid standards to make sense out of our data.
That was great. Thank you. I mean, it's something that struck me, I think, in the plenary session as we were, looking at these wonderful different types of platforms that are in the ocean, profilers going up and down, unmanned surface vessels, underwater vehicles as well, right? How are they talking to each other, or are they talking to each other? All this wonderful data that's being collected, but if it's in 17,000 different languages, how are we actually being able to collate that? And I think it's going to be, Administrator Spinrad is hot on the case. I think we're all thinking about that. So I think we have time for one more question. In the back of the room, here we go.
you. My name is Mark Reel. I'm the Town of Plymouth's Climate Resiliency Planner, and I've been a part of the organizing team that's put this conference together, and so I want to thank everyone for being here. But I was at the Climate Beacon Conference last week at the New England Aquarium, and Secretary Tepper from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs was asked a question about the workforce needed to actually carry out some of the really critical work around climate resiliency. And one of the big efforts is obviously moving to electrify most of our, whether it be transportation or our homes. And so she was asked, what does the workforce look like? What is a critical job that you may respond to young people with as being important? And her response was electricians. I thought that was really striking because it's so, it's out of the realm of what I think about in terms of jobs around climate resiliency. So I'm curious, each of you talk about maybe what you see as maybe a response to young people who are thinking about actually getting something done down the road in this realm.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Okay, workforce development. Who would like to go first? Catherine's looking like she might want to go first. All right, here we go.
I'm going to go in a little bit different direction from that. Going back to the education side of it, and I know we talked earlier in the plenary sessions about STEM education. I'm an engineer. I've got degrees in physics and engineering, but I also studied design as one of my other. I have an MBA, and I think there are a lot of different ways to get involved in climate. In climate, everybody can get involved. It just doesn't have to be somebody with a technical background, right? We need people who can communicate that this is a problem, here's how to take action. We need people that know diplomacy, because this is such a global, international, nobody's in charge kind of problem, right? And I also don't forget the people that are older, right? It's like there are a lot of people now that are looking for their second careers or want to make a difference because they see things are changing a lot and they want to make a really kind of lean in and make a difference after they've retired. And I live on the Cape. We have a lot of really highly skilled, intelligent retired people, or just I would like to see it as expand a focus to this is a problem we all created. We all need to own a solution. And we all have tools that we can bring to this whole problem. And is it something valuable for all of us to contribute to it? And it's just thinking about how your specific tools can contribute to solving the bigger problem. So yes, I support obviously STEM education, workforce development, but I think there's a lot more to it. It's getting it's going to take us all together, rowing in the same direction as I think it's another ocean metaphor, right, to deal with this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because for the climate solutions space, everyone who's working on climate solutions now, was trained to do something else. There has been no curriculum in climate solutions. So most of my career was focused on climate change impacts. And then we've got, electrical engineers, software engineers, business folks. And so I do hear, and I think, this morning there were a bunch of students. What we hear from young folks is they're seeing a market opportunity and employment opportunity, economic opportunity, and now climate solutions in a way that really no one was seeing even 5 years ago. And that's pretty cool to be now thinking about that as a career path. I guess for me, the two things, one, I do think design is a big one of how we incorporate all of these new things into whether it's urban design or product design. We're constantly talking with folks who think about that. And then on the other side, data science. Everyone on our team, even our MBAs, are coding 8 hours a week with new data that we're bringing in. And so I think regardless of what tract folks take in this space, as we've talked about, there's lots of data, there's lots of different kinds of data. Being able to work with that and make the most of it is going to be critical.
I will do this in 1 minute. And first of all, I don't think I could put what you both said. I don't think I could put it any better than it is. It's all hands on deck. It's not just, we're not working in silos where the engineers are over here and the storytellers are over here. It's all hands on deck. People have to be working together. I think, the situation is just that urgent. I was going to say something a little bit about, my nephew graduated Mass Maritime, and I was so impressed with the program there. And one of my engineers said, "Yeah, that's the guy you want working in your facility because he knows how to fix stuff with duct tape and baling wire and keep it going." So those are the kind of guys we're looking for. But no, it's everyone. It's all hands on deck.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, I'm going to say that this session absolutely flew for me. I thought it was fascinating. I hope you all did as well. And I want to thank Catherine and Garrett, John, for your incredible insight. I'm Emily at the Aquarium. We're delighted to be supporting this work. And if you have one take home that from the Aquarium, I'd say, science is actionable, right? Look where we are today. Look where we could be in 5, 10, 15 years. So I'm really excited to be working on this with you all. And thank you very much. So off to coffee.